Why is my mom calling me? If she died 3 years ago? I screamed that thought into the void of my cluttered apartment as if daring the impossible to answer. It was a question that clawed at my sanity from the moment I saw the caller ID flash on my phone while I was barely awake, struggling through another dreary day. I remember the exact moment, a simple, unsuspecting ding on a cold morning that shattered my routine and ignited a maelstrom of memories and fears. My heart hammered as I fumbled for the phone, each beat echoing the promise of a secret I wasn't ready to confront. I answered with a hesitant, "Hello?" only to be met by an agonizing silence, then a whisper so familiar yet distorted by time and static that it sent shivers racing down my spine. "Sweetheart, why did you forget about me?" That single sentence was a spark, igniting a chain of events that would pull me deep into a vortex of mysteries, betrayals, and truths hidden in the darkest corners of my past. I had always known my family held secrets, whispers of old grudges, half-remembered conversations during long, sleepless nights, but nothing could have prepared me for this. With my mind reeling and my thoughts a jumbled mess of grief and confusion, I stared at the phone as if expecting it to transform into something else. The voice, undeniably my mother's, echoed in my ears, transporting me back to a childhood filled with warmth, love, and unspoken warnings. Yet now, that memory was tainted by a sinister aura. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I embarked on an investigation fueled by equal parts dread and defiance. I began by digging through old photographs, letters, and dusty files in a box hidden in the attic, the one my mother had always guarded like a precious secret. Each yellowed page and faded snapshot told a story that began innocently enough with family dinners and laughter, but soon spiraled into a tapestry of hidden affairs, whispered conspiracies, and unresolved mysteries. There was a faded photograph of my mom with a man whose eyes held too much sorrow and secrets, a man I had never met, whose identity was a ghost in our family lore. Was he connected to the call? And what of the mysterious letter she had left behind? A letter that spoke of an unfinished mission and a burden too heavy for one person to bear alone. As I pieced together fragments of the past, I started receiving cryptic messages on my phone, texts with no sender, only numbers that danced on the screen like shadows in a half-lit room. They read like riddles. Trust no one. The past is never truly gone. Remember the night of the storm. The truth is buried beneath the waves. Every message deepened the mystery, hinting at a conspiracy that intertwined our family's history with dark secrets and long-forgotten crimes. My world, once so predictable, now seemed like a labyrinth of half-truths and hidden dangers. I reached out to an old friend, Danny, whose knack for uncovering buried truths had saved me more times than I could count. Over greasy diner coffee, we pored over the evidence. Danny's eyes gleamed with a mix of excitement and caution as he examined the photos and messages. "Man, this is some next-level stuff," he muttered, tapping his finger on a cryptic text. "You sure you want to dive in? This isn't just ghost stories. It's a conspiracy that could ruin lives." His words resonated with my own trembling resolve. I had to know, no matter the cost. That very night, as rain battered my window and thunder rumbled like the drums of fate, I returned home determined to confront the storm. The apartment, usually a refuge, felt like a trap. Shadows danced along the walls as if trying to tell their own tales. I decided to visit the old family house, a place shrouded in mystery and memories, where every creak of the floorboard whispered secrets of a bygone era. The drive there was a blur of flickering streetlights and my racing thoughts, each mile taking me further from the mundane life I once knew and closer to the heart of the enigma. When I arrived, the house loomed large, its silhouette etched against the stormy night like a relic from a forgotten past. I hesitated at the gate, feeling an inexplicable pull that was part nostalgia, part dread. The front door creaked open under my trembling hand as I stepped inside, the musty scent of old wood and faded memories enveloping me. Every corner held a piece of my childhood, but now each seemed laced with secrets and the heavy presence of what had once been lost. In the dim light of a single lamp, I found a room that looked untouched by time, and on a table lay an envelope addressed to me in my mother's familiar handwriting. Inside was a letter that spoke of hidden truths, of a dangerous liaison with a man known only as the Keeper, and of a promise that had been broken. It was as if she had orchestrated her own death to protect me from a darkness that had begun to consume our family. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that somewhere in the vast emptiness of the night, eyes were fixed on me. As I left the house, the rain seemed to wash away more than just the grime of the city. It was like nature itself was trying to cleanse the sins of the past, but the storm was far from over. In the following days, inexplicable incidents plagued me. Anonymous phone calls at odd hours, fleeting figures in the peripheral vision during late-night walks, and dreams so vivid that I awoke, drenched in sweat, haunted by the memory of a figure cloaked in darkness. One particularly stormy evening, as I was sorting through old documents in a forgotten drawer, I uncovered a diary belonging to my mother. Its pages, written in a hurried scrawl, detailed her encounters with a mysterious figure, a stranger who claimed to know secrets about our family that no one else did. The entries spoke of clandestine meetings, secret rendezvous, and a love that was as dangerous as it was forbidden. There were mentions of money exchanged in hushed tones, of betrayals that shattered lives, and of a crime so profound that it had been covered up by those in power. The diary hinted at an alliance between my mother and this enigmatic stranger, an alliance that had ultimately led to her downfall, or so it seemed. I found myself plunged into a spiral of questions. Was my mother's death truly an accident, or had it been orchestrated to silence her? Who was this stranger, and what did he have to do with the secrets buried in our past? And most unnerving of all, why now, after years of silence, was the past clawing its way back into my life? My nights became a blur of restless sleep and feverish research as I combed through every scrap of evidence, every whispered rumor. The deeper I delved, the more I realized that the answers lay not in the obvious, but in the spaces between, in the silence that followed every word. The investigation led me to a rundown bar on the edge of town, a place where the lost and the damned found solace in cheap liquor and hushed conversations. There, among the smoky haze and the murmurs of broken dreams, I met met Lena, a woman whose eyes held the weight of her own battles, whose smile was as enigmatic as the riddles I was trying to solve. She seemed to know more about my mother than anyone else, hinting at a hidden past filled with love, betrayal, and secrets that defied logic. Over shared stories and shots of whiskey, Lena revealed that my mother had once been involved in a network of people who traded in secrets and lies, a network that operated in the shadows of the city. She spoke of a man known only by the moniker, the Keeper, whose influence stretched far and wide, and whose motives were as murky as the bottom of a bottle. Lena's words resonated with the fragments I had uncovered, and I began to suspect that my mother's mysterious call was only the tip of a far more sinister iceberg. The days that followed were a blur of late-night rendezvous, clandestine meetings, and adrenaline-fueled chases through rain-soaked streets. I found myself navigating a labyrinth of half-truths, each clue leading to another layer of deception. Every encounter, every whispered conversation in dimly lit corners, peeled back another layer of the mystery, until I was left with more questions than answers. The city itself seemed to be complicit in the conspiracy, its neon lights flickering like warnings in the night. I recalled a conversation with an old informant, a man who had once been entangled with my mother's circle, who had warned me that some secrets were best left buried, that the deeper you dug, the more dangerous the revelations became. Yet the allure of the truth was irresistible. I became entangled with a journalist named Rick, a relentless seeker of the truth with a reputation for taking on powerful interests. Together, we uncovered evidence that pointed to a high-stakes criminal operation involving not just our family, but a network of influential figures who thrived on corruption and deceit. We discovered bank records, clandestine transfers of large sums of money, and coded messages exchanged between individuals whose identities were shrouded in mystery. Rick's determination was infectious, and as we delved deeper, the stakes grew higher. Every revelation was a double-edged sword. It brought us closer to the truth, but also placed us directly in the crosshairs of those who would kill to keep their secrets hidden. One night, as Rick and I huddled in a cramped motel room, reviewing the latest documents we had intercepted, a knock at the door shattered the fragile calm. My heart raced as I peered through the peephole, half expecting to see a shadowy figure from my nightmares. Instead, I saw a young woman with eyes full of desperation. She introduced herself as Emily, a friend of Lena's, and claimed to have witnessed something that could turn the entire investigation on its head. Over a jittery cup of coffee in the bleak light of dawn, Emily recounted how she had been working as a waitress in a diner frequented by members of the secret network. She had overheard a conversation about a planned exchange at a deserted warehouse on the outskirts of town. The details were sketchy, but one thing was clear. The exchange was linked to my mother's mysterious past and, possibly, to her untimely demise. Fueled by a mix of adrenaline and the fear of the unknown, Rick and I followed the lead. Under the cover of darkness, we arrived at the warehouse, a decaying structure that reeked of rust and forgotten sins. The air was thick with tension as we crept closer, our breaths synchronized with the rhythm of our pounding hearts. Peeking through broken windows, we witnessed a scene that defied rational explanation. Shadowy figures moved in hushed coordination, exchanging envelopes stuffed with cash and documents that glowed ominously under the flicker of a lone fluorescent bulb. I felt a chill run down my spine as I recognized one of the figures, a man whose face was obscured by a hood, but whose gait was eerily familiar. In that fleeting moment, I wondered if fate had finally drawn me into a collision with the darkest corners of my past. The operation at the warehouse was a microcosm of the labyrinth of secrets I had been untangling. Every whispered word, every clandestine exchange, was a piece of a puzzle that spanned decades and continents. I began to see the outlines of a conspiracy so vast that it intertwined with my family history in ways I had never imagined. My mother's secret life was not just a series of isolated incidents. It was part of a network of corruption and power that reached into the highest echelons of society. And at the center of it all was the Keeper, a ghostly figure whose true identity remained elusive, yet whose presence was palpably sinister. As the investigation deepened, my personal life began to unravel as well. A longtime girlfriend, Mia, caught wind of my late-night escapades and mysterious behavior. Our relationship, once a safe harbor from the storms of my past, now trembled on the edge of collapse. Mia demanded answers, her eyes reflecting both love and betrayal. I tried to explain the inexplicable, to make her understand that the past was clawing its way back into my present with a vengeance. But the more I revealed, the more distant she became, until one cold night she packed her bags and left without a word, leaving behind a silence that screamed louder than any confession ever could. Every step I took seemed to lead me deeper into a world where nothing was as it seemed. I began to question my own sanity as I grappled with visions that merged dream and reality. Late one night, while poring over the diary again, I felt a presence beside me, a gentle touch on my shoulder that made me spin around in alarm. The room was empty, yet the sensation lingered, as if my mother's spirit was trying to communicate through the veil of death. I whispered her name into the darkness, and for a fleeting moment, I could almost swear that the air shimmered with her essence. It was a moment of both profound comfort and heart-wrenching sorrow, a reminder that some ties transcend the boundaries of life and death. As days turned into restless nights, the clues began to coalesce into a pattern that pointed towards a long-buried secret. I retraced my mother's steps, visiting old haunts and speaking with people who had once been part of her clandestine world. One such encounter was with an elderly man named Harold, who lived in a crumbling apartment complex on the outskirts of the city. Harold had been a friend of my mother's, a quiet man with a gentle smile and eyes that had witnessed too much. Over a shared cigarette on a rain-soaked porch, he recounted how my mother had confided in him about a hidden ledger, a ledger that contained records of illicit transactions, powerful names, and dangerous liaisons. He warned me in hushed tones that some truths were better left undiscovered, that the pursuit of the past could exact a heavy price. His words echoed in my mind as I continued my journey, each step a dance on the edge of peril. Every revelation tightened the noose around the mystery, until I found myself back at the very heart of it all, the abandoned family house. With the ledger now in my possession, an ancient, leather-bound book filled with cryptic entries, I realized that my mother had orchestrated orchestrated everything. The call, the diary, the clues, they were all pieces of a meticulously laid plan to expose a web of corruption and to warn me of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. I spent hours poring over the ledger, my fingers tracing the faded ink as I deciphered the codes hidden within. It spoke of a clandestine meeting arranged decades ago, of alliances forged in secrecy, and of a betrayal that had shattered lives. The final entry was the most chilling, a reference to a night of reckoning when all truths would be laid bare. My mind raced as I connected the dots between the ledger, the cryptic messages, and the spectral phone call. Was it possible that my mother had faked her death to protect me from the dangerous world she was entangled in? Or was her death merely a prelude to a greater sacrifice? A sacrifice meant to shield me from a legacy of blood and treachery. Each question led to another, until I was drowning in a sea of uncertainty. The relentless pursuit of the truth began to blur the lines between reality and nightmare. In one particularly disorienting moment, I found myself wandering through a foggy park at dawn, the cold mist enveloping me as I tried to escape the ghosts of my past. The park, once a place of innocent laughter and shared secrets, had become a desolate maze of memories. A faint melody drifted through the mist, a tune my mother used to hum when I was a child. I followed the sound, drawn by a force I couldn't explain, until I reached a weathered bench beneath a towering oak. There, etched into the wood, was a single word: forgive. It was a message from the past, a silent plea for absolution, and it sent a shiver down my spine. The more I delved into the labyrinth of secrets, the more I became aware of a dangerous presence that shadowed my every move. I began noticing a black sedan trailing me on several occasions, its tinted windows concealing the identity of its occupants. I felt eyes on me whenever I stepped out into the crowded streets, as if invisible sentinels were monitoring my progress. The feeling of being hunted was palpable, and it wasn't long before I realized that those behind the surveillance were not just remnants of a bygone era, but active players in the dark game my mother had left behind. One rainy night, while I was returning from a meeting with an anonymous informant, the sedan finally made its move. I was forced off the road in a narrow, deserted alley, and a group of shadowy figures emerged from the darkness. My pulse pounded as they encircled me, their faces obscured by the night. I braced myself for the worst, but then, just as quickly as they had appeared, they melted back into the darkness, leaving me trembling and alone. It was a stark reminder that the deeper I went, the more perilous the journey became. In a desperate bid for answers, I decided to confront the keeper directly. Tracking down a location mentioned in the ledger, I found myself at a forgotten pier, where rusted shipping containers lay abandoned against the backdrop of a storm-tossed sea. The wind howled like a chorus of lost souls, and the crashing waves seemed to echo the turmoil within me. I waited, hiding behind a stack of crates, until a solitary figure emerged from the gloom. A man draped in a long coat, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His presence exuded a quiet menace, and as he walked towards me, the realization hit me that I was standing at the precipice of an irreversible choice. I demanded answers, my voice trembling but resolute. "Who are you? What do you want with my mother?" The man paused, his eyes scanning me as if weighing my worth. In a low, gravelly tone, he replied, "You're chasing ghosts, kid. Some truths are better left in the dark." Before I could press further, he vanished into the shadows, leaving me with more questions than answers. The encounter was both a warning and a promise, one that the secrets of the past would not yield easily. Every lead, every clue, brought me closer to a truth that was as elusive as it was terrifying. The investigation consumed me, blurring the boundaries between night and day, reality and nightmare. I became a wanderer in my own life, chasing fragments of a story that seemed to stretch into infinity. My days were spent poring over evidence, and my nights were haunted by dreams of a young girl in a white dress, her eyes filled with sorrow, who silently pleaded for justice. I began to see signs everywhere: a stray word in conversation, a symbol etched on a building's wall, a fleeting reflection in a storefront window. It was as if the universe itself was conspiring to guide me towards an inevitable reckoning. At one point, I found solace in an unlikely source, a small, hidden bookstore tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city. The owner, an eccentric old man with a knowing smile, recognized the desperation in my eyes. He handed me a worn copy of a book on ancient mysticism and secret societies, claiming it held the key to understanding the forces at play. As I leafed through its pages, I discovered references to rituals, prophecies, and a fabled night of reckoning that echoed the final entry in my mother's ledger. The more I read, the more I became convinced that our family was entangled in a cosmic dance of fate, where every choice, every secret, was part of a grand design that spanned generations. One fateful evening, as I sat in a dimly lit cafe trying to piece together the final fragments of the puzzle, my phone buzzed once more. It was a video message. With trembling hands, I pressed play. The video was grainy, shot in a shaky handheld style. It showed a shadowed figure standing in what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse. The figure's voice was barely audible over the background noise, but the message was clear. "They're coming for you. Trust no one. The time is nearly upon us." My blood ran cold as I watched the figure slowly turn toward the camera, revealing a glimpse of a familiar tattoo, a symbol I had seen only in my mother's diary. The realization was staggering. The conspiracy was not only personal, but also connected to a larger network of power and corruption that threatened to engulf everything I held dear. In the weeks that followed, I became increasingly isolated. Friends drifted away, scared off by the dangerous aura that now seemed to surround me. Even the most mundane moments were tainted by the constant fear of being watched, of falling victim to an unseen enemy. I took refuge in the only place that had ever truly made me feel alive: the open road. I rented an old battered car and embarked on a cross-country journey, hoping that distance would offer some semblance of clarity. Yet, no matter how far I drove, the past clung to me like a shadow that refused to dissipate in the light. Every small town, every lonely highway, was a reminder that the secrets of my family were etched into the very fabric of my existence. During one particularly desolate night in a remote motel, I received an unexpected visitor. A young man, barely out of his teens, appeared appeared at my door with eyes that burned with determination. He introduced himself as Alex, a friend of my mother's, he claimed, and said he had been sent to guide me through the final stages of my search. Skeptical yet desperate, I listened as Alex recounted how my mother had entrusted him with a final message, a message that would reveal everything, a message meant only for me. In a hushed tone, he told me about a hidden safe deposit box located in an old bank in the heart of the city. Inside, he whispered, is the truth about everything. But be warned, kid, once you open it, there's no going back. I arrived at the bank on a gray afternoon, the air heavy with the promise of rain. The building, imposing and archaic, exuded an aura of secrets kept for far too long. With a trembling hand, I opened the safe deposit box to find a collection of items that defied simple explanation. A series of letters, photographs, and a small, intricately carved wooden box. The letters were addressed to me in my mother's familiar handwriting, each one chronicling a moment of her clandestine life, each one revealing a piece of a puzzle that now spanned decades. The wooden box contained a single key, its metal cool and unforgiving against my skin, along with a note that simply read, "For when the time is right." That key became my compass in a world gone mad, a world where every door led to more questions and every answer only deepened the mystery. I returned to the family house, the epicenter of it all, with the key clutched tightly in my hand. As I searched the house once more, I discovered a hidden compartment in my mother's old writing desk. With bated breath, I inserted the key into a lock that I had never seen before. The compartment creaked open, revealing a collection of documents and a final letter from my mother. In that letter, she confessed everything: the secret alliance with the Keeper, the reason behind her faked death, and the ultimate sacrifice she had made to protect me from a legacy of corruption and bloodshed. She wrote about how she had seen the forces gathering, a cabal of powerful individuals who would stop at nothing to maintain their control over the hidden networks of money and power. The letter detailed a plan to expose them, a plan that now rested on my shoulders. As I read her words, the room seemed to close in around me. My emotions were a tempest, a swirling mix of grief, anger, and a profound sense of responsibility. I felt the weight of generations pressing upon me, urging me to complete the mission my mother had started. In that moment, every sleepless night, every lonely mile, every fearful encounter crystallized into a single, burning purpose. I was not just chasing ghosts, I was on a collision course with destiny, determined to honor her memory and to bring the truth to light. I began assembling the evidence into a dossier that could not be ignored. I reached out to Rick again, and together we planned a final expose, a confrontation with the dark forces that had haunted my family for so long. With the evidence in hand, we arranged to meet with a trusted investigative journalist who had the clout to bring down powerful figures. The meeting was set for a chilly midnight in a deserted warehouse, the very same place where I had once glimpsed a shadowy figure with a familiar tattoo. Every step I took towards that meeting was laden with both trepidation and resolve. The night of the meeting, the air was electric with tension. I felt the eyes of unseen adversaries tracking my every move, and the familiar sensation of being hunted returned with a vengeance. As I entered the warehouse, I saw Rick already waiting, his expression grim and determined. The journalist arrived moments later, a seasoned veteran with lines etched into his face, eyes that had seen too much, and a reputation for unearthing truths that others dared not touch. The conversation was terse but laden with urgency. We laid out the evidence, piece by piece, the diary entries, the ledger, the bank documents, and, most damning of all, my mother's final letter. Every detail painted a picture of a sprawling conspiracy that stretched from the darkest corners of the city to the highest seats of power. Just as we were about to finalize our plan to publish the expose, the building was plunged into chaos. A sudden crash, the slam of heavy doors, and then the unmistakable sound of footsteps, many footsteps, echoing through the cavernous space. It was a setup. The journalist's phone lit up with urgent messages as masked figures burst through the entryway, their eyes wild with determination and malice. Rick and I barely had time to exchange a glance before we were forced into a frantic scramble for survival. In the ensuing melee, I clutched the dossier to my chest as if it were a lifeline. The confrontation was brutal and chaotic, a cacophony of shouts, crashing metal, and the thud of fists meeting flesh. In the chaos, I managed to slip away, dragging myself through dark corridors and forgotten stairwells, my mind racing with the knowledge that everything was coming to a head. I found refuge in a small maintenance room, heart pounding and body aching from the close brush with death. The air was thick with the smell of oil and rust, and in the flickering light of a lone bulb, I realized that I had reached a crossroads. I could either continue running, forever haunted by the specters of my past, or I could stand and fight to bring down the network that had stolen so much from me. The decision was not mine alone to make. It was written in the very fabric of my existence. In every letter my mother had written, and every secret I had uncovered, I steeled myself for what was to come, knowing that the path ahead was fraught with danger, but lit by the fierce flame of truth. As dawn broke, the warehouse lay in ruins, a battlefield of shattered glass and abandoned equipment. I emerged from my hiding place with a determination that burned brighter than the rising sun. I knew that the forces arrayed against me were powerful, but the evidence I carried was indisputable, a legacy of deceit that demanded to be exposed. In a final act of defiance, I sent the dossier to every major news outlet I could think of, knowing full well that my actions would mark me as an enemy of those who thrived in the shadows. As the first headlines began to form on my phone, a cascade of alerts and notifications, I felt a bittersweet mix of relief and dread. I had set in motion a chain of events that could not be undone, and now the truth would finally see the light of day. In the following days, as the media frenzy exploded and the powerful network scrambled to contain the fallout, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Friends and former allies reached out, some offering support, others demanding silence. The revelations rocked the foundations of the city, and I became both a reluctant hero and a marked man. I spent countless nights in a small safe house, poring over letters and recordings, trying to piece together every detail and every hidden motive. The world around me had transformed into a high-stakes chess game, where every move was watched and every misstep could be fatal. One night, as I sat alone in the dim glow of a flickering street lamp outside the safe house, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't just a voice, but a video call. With a trembling hand, I answered and was greeted by the unmistakable face of Lena, her expression etched with concern and urgency. "You have to listen," she whispered. "There's something else. Something that ties everything together." Lena explained that she had discovered a final piece of the puzzle, a recording hidden in an old voicemail, one that captured a clandestine conversation between my mother and the keeper. The recording was grainy and distorted, but it revealed a plan that was as audacious as it was dangerous, a plan to dismantle the entire criminal network from within. Lena's voice cracked as she recounted how my mother had confided in her, revealing that she had been working undercover, risking everything to expose those responsible for a crime that had claimed innocent lives. The revelation struck me like lightning. In that moment, I understood that every twist and turn, every night of terror, and every whisper of betrayal had led to this final confrontation with destiny. I felt an overwhelming surge of purpose, an undeniable call to finish what my mother had started. I gathered the recording and the remaining evidence, determined to see the mission through, no matter the cost. I knew that the final showdown was imminent, a culmination of years of hidden truths and buried secrets. It all came crashing together on a rain-soaked night that felt charged with the weight of destiny. I stood before the imposing headquarters of the network, a sleek, modern building that was a stark contrast to the decaying relics of the past. With a deep breath, I pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped inside, the echoes of my footsteps resonating in the cavernous lobby. Every step felt like a march towards the inevitable, every heartbeat a countdown to a reckoning that had been decades in the making. In a high-stakes confrontation in a boardroom filled with cold, calculating faces, I laid out the evidence. The room fell into a stunned silence as the truth was laid bare, an intricate tapestry of greed, power, and betrayal woven through the lives of those who believed themselves untouchable. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow as I looked into the eyes of the conspirators. Their expressions shifted from shock to anger, and I knew that I had struck a nerve that could no longer be ignored. The final words of my mother's letter echoed in my mind, a plea for justice, for truth, for redemption. And then, as if on cue, chaos erupted. Security forces stormed in, and amidst the uproar, a man in a tailored suit made his move. I caught a glimpse of him, a flash of determination in his eyes, and a gesture that was almost familiar. In that split second, everything became clear. The man was none other than the elusive keeper himself, the very architect of the labyrinth of secrets I had been unraveling. In the midst of the confusion, as alarms blared and voices clashed in a cacophony of anger and fear, I found myself face to face with the man who had orchestrated it all. His eyes locked onto mine, and in that electrifying moment, the layers of deception fell away, revealing a truth that was both simple and devastating. The confrontation escalated rapidly, a tense standoff where words were replaced by a silent understanding of the inevitable. In that frozen moment, with the chaos swirling around us and the weight of countless secrets pressing in from every side, I reached out to him. I demanded answers in a voice that trembled with both fury and sorrow. The keeper's lips curled into a knowing smile, and as he spoke the final words that would unravel the tangled web of deceit, everything came crashing into focus. In the midst of the pandemonium, I felt a sudden clarity, a revelation that fused every fragmented memory, every hidden truth, and every painful loss into a single, undeniable moment of understanding. It was as if my mother's spirit had been guiding me all along, steering me through the labyrinth of betrayal to this very point. And then, with the room spinning around me, with the world teetering on the brink of revelation and ruin, he uttered the words that would forever change everything. "I did it for you." In that heart-stopping instant, the weight of the past, the pain of lost love, the anguish of betrayal, and the courage of a mother's sacrifice converged into one shattering realization. I saw the truth, raw and unfiltered, and it was a truth that I had been chasing in the darkness for far too long. As the chaos slowly subsided, the conspirators were led away, their secrets laid bare for the world to see. I stood alone in that vast, echoing room, the evidence of a lifetime clutched in my trembling hands, and a single thought reverberated in the silence. I had finally come full circle. And then, as I turned to leave, I paused for a moment at the threshold of everything I had uncovered. In that lingering silence, the memory of my mother's voice, her whispered plea, her final sacrifice, echoed one last time in my mind. I stepped out into the rain, the city's neon lights reflecting off the wet pavement like shards of broken dreams, and I knew that though the battle was over, the journey had only just begun. Every secret, every heartbreak, every twist of fate had led me to this defining moment, and as I walked away, the final realization washed over me with the force of a tidal wave. And then I understood everything, and then I saw him.